Hello again. Now, the fight against gender-based violence should start with women's empowerment. That's according to the Minister of Women, Youth and People with Disabilities, Maite Mashavane. She says women must not depend on men for their survival. Minister Mashavane was speaking earlier today at the launch of this year's 16 Days of Activism campaign in Nasrec, Soweto. Now, let's discuss the issues around GBV and women's empowerment now with the Soul City Institute CEO, Phinah, Kodisang, Mara Glennie from the Tears Foundation, as well as Hermien, Head of Sustainability Stakeholder Engagement at Anglo. Ladies, good afternoon. Welcome to today, and thank you very much for your time. Of course, today marks the beginning of the annual 16 Days of Activism for No Violence Against Women and Children. And this is done year in and year out. But the crime stats that we saw just the other day, and Phinah Kodisang from the Soul City Institute joined me for a discussion around those figures, and welcome again to talk to us this afternoon. But I want to start with you, Mara, and I'm going to ask Hermien the same question. Do you think the country, as South Africa, we are really doing bad? I mean, we're failing. We're failing to address GBV. Monies have been thrown around. There have been campaigns, there have been demonstrations, there have been marches. But yet today, the numbers are horrendous. The numbers of women who are abused, the numbers of women who are raped, the numbers of women who are killed. What's your view, Amara? We are failing.
I think the country is failing us. I think the systems are failing us. And I think we have every right to be angry because we are not getting the help we need. And so I was surprised to see that the minister said that it's up to the community to help with abused children, but it's up to the community to work for everybody because the government is failing us.
Yeah, let me bring you in, Hermien, from the private sector at Anglo. This is the same kind of question, you as well, I mean, as a woman. I mean, the companies, I mean, should play a more active role. What do you think?
Hi, thank you for having me. Look, we're not making the progress that we need to on this, and the private sector needs to play its part like absolutely every other portion of society. I do have a hope. It might be completely unrealistic, but my hope is that some of the increase is because people who are being harmed are speaking up and they're reporting what's happening to them. But any increase is absolutely unacceptable. We sit here every year and we have these conversations at the beginning of the 16 Days of Activism, and not a lot changes. And absolutely the private sector needs to be part of the solution.
Yes, and it's a difficult one. I mean, I asked Kodisang, I'm going to ask you again because you are all here today, that the bulk of the violence against women and children is committed by people known to them, by people who live with them, by people who should be protecting them, by people who claim they love them, but it's not the case. So in fighting GBV, as this campaign, this year's campaign of 16 Days of Activism begins, Kodisang, how do you think we can shift the needle towards more protection and safety?
First of all, we need to move the campaign from the 16 days to 365. So every day should be a day where we are talking prevention, not only November 25th to December 10th. And secondly, we need to address structural drivers of gender-based violence. We have not touched that. You know, we continue talking about the police, continue talking about, other partners getting involved in educating, creating awareness, but we are not addressing the structural issues. There's poverty, there's unemployment, there's a lot of hate, anger, frustration happening in the homes because the socio-economic status of homes are in dire distress. Even now with the basis, kind of what is this increase now that was announced?
The repo rate, the interest rates, yes, the repo rate has gone up, yes.
It has gone up, more frustrations, and I can tell you there are companies that are downsizing. So there's a lot at play. And so that's why we as Soul City, we talk about intersectionality in addressing the issue. We just don't have all the resources to be able to address GBV if we are going to look at it as a siloed intervention. We need to look at every little thing and how it contributes to the scourge of gender-based violence, because we need to look at the race of people, the class, the sex, the nationality, the disability. All these things are compounding factors, and we need to address each and every one of them, so that because they are the sums of the whole.
Yeah, but above it all, there's inequality. What's your view, Mara?
I absolutely believe there's inequality. So I think there should be equality of service. Every person in this country should have the service they need. And we should have a proper service that meets the needs of people. Women that have been abused and children that have been abused are desperate for help, and it's not out there to receive. So I do believe we should have to have equality, but equality in the types of service. We talk about being a world-class country. We need to offer world-class services to the victims and the women and children in the country.
Yeah. One of the aspects, one of the pillars that sort of sometimes is raised when we talk about GBV is the fact that we focus a lot on the girl child. And not much on the boy child. I mean, because they're going to grow up to be young men and so on. And you, as a foundation, as a Tears Foundation, have been doing something there. Tell us about that very briefly.
Well, we believe that we can't do it alone. We believe that together with men, we can fight gender-based violence. It's a woman's issue because it happens to us, but it's not a woman's fight. It's a woman's fight together with men. We believe we have to educate boys and men to break the stereotypes, to stand up against traditional norms, and together they need to fight with us for our freedom. We cannot do it alone.
Yeah. What about the private sector's role? I mean, Anglo-American, Hermien, you doing some work also in this field in terms of assisting the fight against GBV. Just tell us, what are you doing?
Yes, absolutely. I think all companies, including Anglo-American, should start at home and fix their own backyard. Every one of us needs to have a very clear policy that is zero tolerance for any harassment at work, and clear procedures that people can follow if they are the victims of violence at work. In South Africa, we've just recently launched an independent hub to support victims of violence at work as well as domestic violence, because we found that sometimes internal processes are not trusted, or they don't operate quickly enough, or they don't have the kind of expertise that people need when they have suffered trauma. Secondly, it's not just about supporting people at work, it's about changing culture that can then also translate into home environments. And speaking of home environments, domestic violence is such a big issue. It has a business cost attached to it. But even if that weren't the case, every company needs to be open to understanding that employees have home lives. And if they are harmed in their home lives, companies can play a part in helping them through that, whether it's paid time off. At Anglo-American, we even provide sheltering services and direct security support for employees who are going through that. And then lastly, playing a part in your community, and mining. Communities are part of mining. Mining is part of communities, and there's no way we can tackle this issue if we just look at the workplace. So we work with shelters in our areas on the response side, because we know people aren't getting the kind of services they deserve. And then doing longer work on prevention, which is about changing really the institutions and the structure of our society.
Yeah, I was speaking to a senior Gauteng government official yesterday, Ms. Nontsikelelo Sisulu, because today in Soweto they were launching the Gauteng government's own campaign as we begin the 16 days of activism. And the issue of partnerships came up, that it's very important. Nobody can do it alone. But there are challenges, Hermien. I mean, you've just outlined some good stuff that you at Anglo-American as a mining company are doing. But what are the main challenges here for you?
The challenge is the absolute complexity of the problem. I do feel there's a lot of goodwill, a lot of people across different institutions in society wanting to make a difference, but feeling disempowered because we feel like if we can't solve the whole problem, that our little piece of the puzzle isn't good enough, and that's just not true. People have to work individually to understand their contribution, good or bad, towards GBV, work within their family environments, how you talk to your boys, how you talk to your girls, how you interact with your spouse. Then we look at our institutions in schools. What small part can we play in our role as parents or people in the governing body to change the way our schools operate? And then we look at some of those really difficult societal factors, things like inequality, gender norms, toxic masculinity that we hear about so often. So it can be incredibly overwhelming because it is such a complex problem, but that doesn't mean that every contribution doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, so every little bit counts. It sounds to me, Kodisang, like we need a kind of a revolution, that we men need to unlearn so much that we've been socialized with at a patriarchal level, and also you got this deep in South Africa, these deep entrenched socio-economic inequalities.
We actually need to, change our culture, and you use culture to change culture. And we are not touching on those. We leave culture alone. We leave religion alone. We leave so many things outside that we should be bringing into, the ecosystem of dealing with gender-based violence. So until we do that, until we know that all these things intersect, we need to bring them in. Now, we will continue.
At the culture level is also how boys are brought up, Mara. How we are socialized, Mara. So your program as the Tears Foundation to change that. What are you focusing on around boys and young men?
We are working with a program that's been launched in the school called What About the Boys, which is being rolled out. And alongside them, we are offering a new mobile service called Speak Up. And that is so that on your mobile phone, anywhere in South Africa, if you dial *134 *7355#, you can get the help you need. And you can also get advice, because it is a very, very scary journey. If we're looking at the facts of how many young girls are giving birth and the number of babies that are born today that are abandoned. We help with abandoned babies. People drop their babies into checkers bags and leave them in the rubbish dumps, because basically it is the most intolerable situation for these young women of 13 and 14 to give birth, because by giving birth, it is not the joy of a new life. It is losing the life she could have had, the education she could have had, the school she could have gone to, the qualifications that she could have had. We just are not supporting our young men and our young women going forward. Do you know that besides the fact that we're on arrears with our DNA, our hospitals and clinics have run out of condoms and birth control pills? So that means after this school holiday, we are going to have a scourge of children with babies because they cannot take the proper birth control. We are just not caring for our children.
It's a huge challenge, and with all these various complexities that Hermien was mentioning it, but we can't give up. We have to carry on the fight, working together and identifying them. I'm going to give you half a minute each as we conclude, because this is our time now. And if there was anything else that you'd like to share with our viewers as the country begins this annual 16 days of activism campaign for no violence against women and children from the private sector, Hermien?
I'll use my time to pitch collaboration. There are many different companies, including in individual sectors, that are doing a lot of work and not quite knowing exactly what to do. This is not a comfortable space for the private sector. We know we need to do something. A lot of us don't know what exactly, and we end up kind of missing each other and not using opportunities to collaborate between the private sector, but then also with civil society and with government. This isn't one of those issues where we walk in different directions. We have to find common ground, and everyone needs to understand their role in addressing the epidemic.
Collaboration. Kodisang?
For Nakere, we should be asking ourselves, who are the 10,000 that, who have been raped? Do we know who they are in terms of their race, their class, their disability? Because we need to reflect honestly about how we perpetuate violence at the intersections of everyone's vulnerability. There are some people that we just don't care about, and we perpetuate violence in that way.
So we need to get more detail around the data. Final word to you, Mara?
I absolutely agree with you about collaboration. I'm proud to say we collaborate with Soul City, and we collaborate with as many people as we possibly can, because alone we cannot do it. Together we can make a meaningful difference, because we can fight this challenge if we work together.
Thank you very much to you ladies this afternoon here on Today, as we reflect on this tough pandemic, as it's been named and called, the scourge of GBV, as the country is beginning the 16 Days of Activism campaign. Thank you very much. That's the Soul City Institute CEO, Phinah Kodisang, Mara Glennie from the Tears Foundation, as well as Hermien, the head of sustainability stakeholder engagement at Anglo American.